Well, good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the CABE 2020 virtual community and our sixth webinar in a series of special speakers being made available to our CABE 2020 virtual community. I'm Jan Gustafson-Correa, CABE CEO. And while I wish we could have been together in San Francisco earlier this month for CABE 2020, it's good to be together virtually and to welcome you again. I hope that as the weeks go on with the COVID-19 situation, that you are finding yourself in a safe and healthy place, managing the circumstances due to the COVID-19, and ready today to join together with your CABE familia over the next several weeks via the CABE Virtual 2020 community through our website and our webinars. So to get us started, it's my great pleasure to introduce a dear friend and colleague, our CABE Board President, Olivia Yaya. Olivia?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Bienvenidos. Today's webinar is being presented by two wonderful researchers and practitioners in the field of biliteracy and English learner education, Dr. Margarita Calderon and Dr. Hector Montenegro. Their presentation is sponsored by the generous support of Velázquez Press, a platinum level sponsor of CABE 2020. As we get ready for today's exciting session, I have a few housekeeping matters to share. As this is a webinar, the speakers' microphones will be active and the participants will all be on mute. If you would like to pose a question during the presentation, please use the chat icon on the Zoom control menu at the bottom of your screen. And the chat window will pop up where you will be able to type in your questions or comments. For better focus, we will not be using the Q&A icon or window for today. After the webinar, we will be posting the recorded version on the CABE 2020 virtual community website so you can re-listen and share it with others. Sit back, relax, and get ready for 45 minutes of powerful engagement and learning. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Arthur Cho of Velázquez Press, a special sponsor of CABE, to share a few words of welcome. Arthur.
Thank you, Olivia. And we really like to thank you, CABE, this opportunity to work with our author and working with CABE to share their knowledge with every CABE member. I really miss you to the CABE meeting this year in San Francisco. We hope to see you next year in Long Beach. And we would love to see welcome back Margarita Calderon and Dr. Hector Montenegro to speak at next year's events. We also really want to thank everyone to join us today for the next an hour to hear the expert idea and share some information about how can we work with the long-term EL. I know Dr. Margarita Calderon for a while. I think 20 years ago, I know her name as the expert for academic language development. Her work is really showcasing the United States Department of Education and as one of the preeminent authority on academic language development. But most important thing here is she's actually one of us. She grew up in El Paso. She was a former English learner, so she really knows the struggle for all the long-term EL students. And Dr. Hector Montenegro is actually also one of us. Even most of us know him from his superintendent or principal work in Texas, also the chief academic officer in Washington, D.C. But he's actually from Los Angeles, East LA, if anything. So he also knows the struggle for many long-term EL students. How can we work with them? Dr. Montenegro is an expert in social emotion development. I think very often the long-term EL issue is not just the language, but also how can we support them in the social emotion development. Let us welcome Dr. Margarita Calderon and Dr. Hector Montenegro.
Thank you very much, Arthur. And hello, my CABE friends y bienvenidos. I hope you're all doing well, keeping your distance, being safe, staying healthy, but staying connected socially. During this webinar, we will be giving a very brief overview of the steps towards preventing long-term ELs with social and emotional learning, SELs is better known, language, literacy, and content. Taken in the context of our current situation, what we will be presenting to you will hopefully give you some ideas that will contribute to the work that you are currently doing remotely with students, parents, community members, colleagues, or even administrators. Hopefully, this transitional period will afford you some time to reflect on your current practices and begin the process of preparing for when the students return. Many of the images you'll see in our presentation may be more of a reflection of the most recent past. However, within the context of SEL, now is the time to work collaboratively through, even though remotely, to begin creating and practicing a new reality that is more inclusive, compassionate, creative, academic, and socially and emotionally sensitive to the challenges that parents, students, teachers, and administrators are struggling with at this time. Our hope is that this webinar will give you a few ideas that will further contribute to your skills and competencies in teaching and in working in this new learning environment. Since this is a very short presentation, we will be providing you with a QR code and links at the end of the presentation, which you will be able to access additional information. So don't forget to do a screenshot or even take out your phones to read the QR code. And now at this time, I'll turn it over to Margarita Calderon, who will focus on language, literacy, and content that will hopefully prevent long-term ELs. And I'll also add a few insights on the integration of SEL in the learning environment. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. And it's quite an honor to be here. I think I've been with CABE forever, ever since you started. I used to live in California, but this was many, many lives ago. And with Shelley and others, we struggled and we fought and we built the MTTIs and we did all kinds of exciting things. So it's delightful to be here with you today. It's quite an honor, and I thank CABE and I thank Velázquez Press for letting us do this. So what we'd like to do today is to start out with preventing long-term ELs. And we want to think about preventing long-term ELs with social emotional learning, first and foremost, but also with language, literacy, and content. So let's begin by looking at a picture. Let's look at a picture first of all. And this is a picture. And it's in that yellow frame. And the picture that we see, I want you to tell me what is wrong with this picture. We have 75 to 85% of ELs nationwide that are long-term ELs, and they have been in schools, in US schools since kindergarten, or at least 6 years. And they're still labeled as ELTs by the US Department of Education. And sometimes we see these students under other labels, such as expanding, bridging, reclassified. Nevertheless, they're still long-term ELs. So what I'd like for you to do is to go to the chat box and just think about this picture and what do you see here? Begin to think about it, because on the next slide, I have some questions for you that I want you to answer in the chat box. So if we could take a look at these other questions. So I want you to put in the chat box, which one of these describes your long-term ELs the best? Which is prevalent in your school or in your school district? Let me go through them with you and be thinking about one, which is the most prevalent. So number one, is it language literacy and content learning in first and second language acquisition that was not developed or was interrupted along the way somewhere? Or number two, are their reading skills superficial at best? What about number three? Academic writing is yet to be developed? Or number four, do you sense a low sense of self-efficacy in the long-term ELLs? Or look at five. Are they in great need of social emotional understanding as well as skill development? So would you take a couple of seconds, and Hector's going to be looking at your responses.
Looks like we're getting a couple of people saying number three, academic writing is yet to be developed. I've got a couple of 1s and 4s, but 4 and 5 seems to be popping up, low sense of self-efficacy. Number 3 again, academic writing. Number 4, low sense of self-efficacy. Oh, 4 again. And number 3, this seems to be surfacing quite a bit. And 1, 2, 3, and 4. All of the above. Number 3 again, number 3. A few number 1s. And yeah, seems like number 3 and 4 seem to be getting the bulk of the response. Somebody answered 23, but that's not on there. Maybe that meant 2 and 3. Number 5 also. So it seems like the response is heavily into 3 and 4 and a couple of 5. So let's take a look at.
Yeah, and you know, that's pretty much the trend nationally. Writing. So writing is one of those that is quite prevalent. But here are some other questions, and it kind of leads us into the writing. So the questions are, how many of your darlings have been victims of the literacy wars? And here are 5 different things for you to consider. Again, which is the most prevalent one? Number 1, have they had too much phonics? Just plain phonics? Or number 2, perhaps they had too much whole language and not enough phonics. Or number 3, their balanced literacy was a bit unbalanced. Or number 4, maybe there was too much sheltering and not enough rigor. Or number 5, not enough reading comprehension instruction was received all the way through the different grade levels. So
some interesting responses, Margarita. It says too much isolated literacy instruction devoid of content. Some feel that number 2 is also very strong. Several mentioned too much whole language. Number 4 has showed up a few times, and 5 as well. But the responses are, yeah, they're pretty strong around 2, 5. Oh, here we have a lot of 3s, too much unbalanced literacy. So
yeah.
Interesting response, yeah.
Very interesting. But again, this is a national trend.
Yeah.
But let me share what the research says, and then we can discuss this a little bit further. So the bottom line is that, well, before the bottom line, Hector, we want to go back and look at what the research says.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. He's quite eager to get to the bottom line.
Yeah.
So the research says that vocabulary knowledge correlates with reading comprehension, right? So we're starting with reading comprehension. Unless students else learn 3,000 to 5,000 words per year, they're not really comprehending. But the interesting thing is that reading comprehension correlates with everything, with procedural knowledge, with metacognitive skills, with content knowledge, in all the subject areas. If we want them to learn the subject, they have to comprehend what they're reading. And The more that ELLs read expository text, the better they write. Reading correlates with writing. And if there's not enough reading comprehension going on, then that's going to be quite evident in the writing. And of course, finally, content knowledge correlates with academic success. With all those tests and all the content that the students have to learn. But let's look at some more research.
Yeah.
So the research also gives us evidence-based strategies now. We know that teaching words and phrases from a text before the students are going to read, during the reading, and after they read, builds their language competency. But comprehension depends on knowing between 90 to 95% of the words in a paragraph, on a page, on a test question. How many times have you encountered that you knew they knew the concept, they knew the answer, but they got it wrong? And that's because they weren't really understanding the test question because of maybe 2-3 little words in that test question. So knowing words means explicit instruction and not just exposure to reading, not reading independently, but rather students need to use keywords and phrases verbally at least 12 times before they start the reading. And once they read, after each paragraph, they have to summarize and use those words again. So now we can go to the bottom line.
Okay, well, I think we're going over to the strategies.
Before we get, yes. So continuing with these strategies, we recommend that every teacher in the school go through professional development and all of these strategies, because as we know, when Tier 1 or general education teachers do not provide quality instruction for ELLs and all their students, they fall through the gaps, and that's when they become long-term ELLs. And if the Tier 2 interventions are not using comprehensive strategies, then the ELLs continue to fall through the gaps. And that's when they typically wind up in special education, or worse yet, this is when they drop out of school. And as some of my colleagues at Johns Hopkins like to call them, they're push-outs, they get pushed out. So in the next line, we get to the preventing long-term ELLs. How do we go about preventing long-term ELLs? Well, it's not just the ESL, ELD teacher's responsibility anymore. It's the whole school. Language and literacy have to be embedded in all core content classrooms. And ELLs need to engage cognitively in challenging language, literacy, social emotional learning, and of course, content instruction, but in all the classrooms, all the classrooms. So the goal would be to do a whole school goal, have the whole school begin to think about these 4 goals. First of all, strengthening instruction across the board. Across the board. We all need to learn constantly. And so everyone, I think, needs to go back and take a look at this collectively. And then think about sharing instructional responsibilities. What do we need to do from here on? Number 3, it's really, really, really zooming in on the long-term ELLs data. Not just to collect the numbers, but to look at what needs to come back for number 1 and number 2. What do we need to do once we look at the data in order to strengthen instruction across the board? And then, of course, number 4, providing continuous professional development and lots of coaching tailored to ELL success, focusing on ELL success. If it's done for 1 year, wonderful things happen in schools. But we've seen how schools go from lowest performing schools to highest performing schools when the school focuses on just these 4 goals. So which one do you think is most important? Number 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Great. We are taking a look at a couple of folks saying number 4, providing continuous professional development, and also number 4 again. Number 1 seems to be popping up, but number 4 is overwhelmingly the strongest response. And also number 1, strengthening instruction. So it seems to be general consensus that those 2 are kind of their dominant concerns here and how best to take a whole school approach. Yeah.
That's why I love California.
There you go. Number 4 again, it's just pouring in. Number 4, but says start at number 3, zooming on an LTEL data as well.
Yeah. And then go back and forth.
Yeah. Coaching can change teaching practice as well. So some really good responses here. You need to support and have accountability for number 4. There's no silver bullet. Well.
All right. Well, and so let's take a look at what Hector is going to tell us about social emotional learning.
Great. Thank you, Margarita. I think you really have made it very clear that it is a collective responsibility, not just those of the ESL teachers or bilingual teachers or teachers that work with ELs, but it's really the whole school's responsibility. And when we talk about social and emotional learning, I have found that as I've visited schools working with teachers and administrators, there is a lot of SEL, social emotional learning, going on, but it's not necessarily always identified as such. One of the things that we see with these children is that there's a sense of engagement, a sense of belonging. There's a joy in learning and being part of the school. And unfortunately, we don't see that all the time. So as we take a look at the definition of SEL, it is the process. It's not a product where you stop what you're doing and all of a sudden you teach SEL and then you go back to the way you're doing it, but it's a process to which the children, the adolescents, and adults acquire, and that's part of the knowledge base, and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to first understand and manage emotions. I'll talk just a little bit about that, but it's really coming in terms with your own sense of values, your own, even when we talk about implicit bias and the impact in opinions and perspective that you have towards children from different language groups of diversity. Set and achieve positive goals. I'm going to put this right smack into the context of an instructional learning environment and a school climate. And if we want to see all children be successful, we are going to have to be very clear of not just setting goals, but also achieving goals and taking responsibilities for them. Feel and show empathy for others. A lot of times we just put children into classrooms because of language, and we're not really taking a collective responsibility and sensitivity towards how they're feeling, their particular histories and needs are, especially when newcomers come in. Establish and maintain positive relationships, teacher to teacher especially, and that sets the climate and tone of a school, and then teacher to student, and helping students to have positive relationships even among themselves. And finally, make responsible decisions. So when we look at the data, is the data showing that our educational system is making responsible decisions? Maybe for some, but certainly not for all when we're talking about long-term ELLs. So this is the castle wheel. And I really like this representation of the research that shows that self-awareness and self-management are intrapersonal. That's what goes on inside. It's coming to terms with your own sense of well-being, your own sense of values, being able to reflect on how your response to certain circumstances and issues really impact your decision making. Social awareness, valuing diversity, showing empathy and compassion for others, and relationship skills that I want to touch on just a little bit. But it occurs not only in curriculum and instruction, but also school-wide practices, from that front office to the administrator, to the support staff, into the cafeteria, and into the classroom as well, and expanding out to the family and community as partners in the implementation of social and emotional learning. And oftentimes we see in education that communication gap, that break, that lack of understanding, participation, and engagement on the part of the community. So, también está en español, conciencia de sí mismo, autocontrol, conciencia social. So this gives you also a little bit of resource, and I have that included on the QR code. So these are the 5 core competencies that, based on research, we've come to understand that there is a foundational part, which is the self-awareness and self-management, that will lead into social awareness and relationship skills once you have a better understanding of your values and your sense of well-being, and also how that leads into responsible decision-making. So self-awareness is the ability to accurately recognize one's own emotions and thoughts and values, and how they influence not only your behavior, but effects on the behavior of others. So we begin in the classroom, the way teachers look at children, the way they greet children, the way they include children. That all is a sense of their own sense of values. The implicit bias that we often see in schools, especially towards ELs, begins right from where adults are self-aware, identifying those emotions and understanding what it is, those triggers that you have, what it is that you do to help calm yourself down, what is the values you have toward education and educating children as well. Another example is relationship skills. That is about that ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. It's not just the adults being able to relate to diverse populations, but it's the ability of the adults, and I hear this from children all the time, to help children make friends. And working with students, they say very loud and very clearly, adults are not helping us to make friends. They segregate us. They put us in ESL classrooms. They keep us apart. We suffer in silence in the classroom. I hear that so many times. And what happens, it demotivates them from the desire to learn because they're not being included. There is a whole sense of learning in a classroom environment that can motivate children to want to participate, to want to engage. But adults have to also have the skill set and the competency to facilitate relationships so that learning becomes joyful. Learning becomes a part of our desire to see all students be successful. That communication, social engagement, it's not about sitting in rows and working on worksheets, it's about engaging activities. And responsible decision-making. Are our systems in our schools the best decisions that we can make for the benefit of all children? And the fact that we have so many long-term ELs, we can prevent the vast majority of ELs becoming long-term just by revisiting our belief system, by revisiting the way we connect children to children, the way that we design our instructional program to be more inclusive, engaging, and collaborative. You know, it's not just the adults that are responsible for helping ELs become proficient in English, it's their peers and colleagues that we look at in terms of getting them together, to work together, to educate each other, to tutor each other, and to value each other. You know, I'm going to say it, you know, white children need as much exposure to diversity as incoming newcomers want to learn about our community, whether it be African American, Asian, Native American. Our educational system needs to help facilitate those connectivities. And to me, that is a responsible decision to help build relationships. So we also have this in Spanish, and that's also located on the side. So empathy is seeing with the eyes of another. It's listening with the ears of another, and also feeling with the heart of another. Y también, en español, empatía es ver con los ojos del otro, escuchar con los oídos de otro, y sentir con el corazón de otro. So we know that in whatever language it is, empathy is that ability to understand and to show compassion for those that may be different from us and to welcome them. And working with teachers, these are two charts that they developed in one of the schools that I was working. And the question is very simple. What does a mindful relationship mean? And looking at the words respectful, collaborating, thoughtful, being in their shoes, aware of others' feelings, does that occur in the classroom? And I think in focusing on social and emotional learning, that should be our responsibility to make sure it's implemented within the classroom. Relationship skills, and these are characteristics and traits that were developed in part of professional development. One of the things that I see is are all of these activities that are coming out now focusing on kindness and empathy. So the Great Kindness Challenge is a school-wide initiative to reach out to students that come from diverse backgrounds that probably need support. Love this activity. It's generally in January, but it should be every day throughout the year to help empower students to create a culture of kindness, caring, and acceptance. And no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. So we're seeing how teachers can reach out to students no matter how large or small the classroom is. SEL really emphasizes the connectivity, the relationships, the empathy and compassion for students to set the foundation in which academics needs to occur. So this is a promissory note that I saw in elementary school, and it says that I promise to love you. It's a message from the teacher to the student, and every day she would pick out one of the promises that she'd make to remind students that she is there for them. I promise to care about you. I promise to believe in you. I promise to make learning fun so you'll love school. I promise to help you become a great reader and writer. And I promise to help you to become a happy and confident individual. So this is the image that I believe that we should see in all schools, valuing diversity, students helping students because adults have been engaged in not only teaching social and emotional skills, but helping to implement and practice them. So we have the 3 signature SEL practices for adults in classroom based on research. This is a part of CASEL's focus on the implementation of SEL rather than just talking about it. And one is becoming welcoming rituals that promote activities for inclusion. At the very beginning, how do you help children to feel welcome? Engaging practices that provide adults and students those opportunities for sense making and brain breaks. So we want students to interact with students from all language groups, ability to show that support, compassion, and empathy toward each other. And it can't be done if we keep them apart. And also optimistic closure that offers time for reflection and looking forward for adults, beginning at adults, whether it be faculty meetings, professional development. Don't go just to professional development and not reflect on how best to implement the practices that we're taught. Again, ideas from elementary level, welcoming routines, engaging pedagogy, and optimistic closure to secondary level. So this is a universal practice that we see that schools that have taken the school-wide approach towards SEL implementation spend time developing, reflecting, and also implementing the learnings that they had just experienced. And so this SEL 3 signature practices playbook is also available to you on the link. Now, I love this from Santa Clara County. My name, my identity. To know my name is to know me. To me, that is a welcoming ritual, not only adults to children, but children to children. I can't tell you, especially at the secondary level, students may go a whole year without anybody knowing their name, without anybody greeting them. And there's been a lot of studies to see how long do ELs remain silent. And a lot of times it's even as many as 5 days out of the week where there's no opportunity to engage and interact with English dominant students. And to me, this is a proactive approach. This is prevention. And even when students become long-term ELs, they still need to feel welcome. They still need to be greeted by their peers from all backgrounds to have them greet each other. Explicit instruction for social and emotional learning is at the elementary level, the middle school level, and even high school community circles that bring students together to share their feelings, their thoughts, and get all of that heavy burden, that feeling of isolation, that fear, that anxiety out, so that everybody can share and participate and prepare them for a better academic learning environment. Elementary level, knees to knees, eyes to eyes. This is strategically done not only for social and emotional learning, but also for academic. How can students practice a vocabulary word 12 times if they never have an opportunity to interact? How can students make meaning out of a teacher's presentation if they don't have any opportunities to interact and make meaning and to help each other learn? Also at the secondary level, this is a social studies class, but I've seen it in math, I've seen it science, even in physical education, where students take a minute to not only greet each other at the very beginning of the class, but share each other's thoughts, experiences, to connect, so that when you do, in a way, this is what Parker Palmer calls the work before the work. You do this work, and by the time you get into cooperative learning strategies, as well as project-based learning, students are better able to get along and interact. A very dysfunctional school I worked with recently, and it wasn't until the students were brought together that they really understood some of the issues that they were facing, some of the problems that they were dealing with in the school and at home. So this is one of the things that I really believe strongly that SEL brings to the table, is student voice, that ability to interact, exchange ideas, and now set the tone for a positive learning environment. Being together, working together is so critical in helping all of our students become successful, but you can't do it in a very isolated traditional learning environment. And teachers, I'm going to tell you that I know that stress level is really high. And we look at some of the issues that teachers are dealing with, especially now with remote learning and having to be at home and taking care of children at home at the same time, and being catapulted into cyberspace. And now we have to teach online. That is very stressful. And as it says, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself, educators. You must begin with you. So I want to share with you a metta. This is a practice from Pali. It is a message of friendship, of caring, and compassion. And this is something that I see as part of an SEL practice in which we have to take care of ourselves. And this metta starts off with an affirmation. And this affirmation is something that keeps us focused from the very first thing that you think about to the afternoon, or even when you go to bed. So the practice is, even with children, they just love this. Put your hand on your heart, and I'm going to ask you to join me, please. Put your hand on your heart, and together we're going to read this metta together. Ready, go. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be at peace. Ahora en español, con la mano en el corazón. Ready, go. Espero estar seguro. Espero ser feliz. Espero estar saludable. Espero estar en paz. So practice this on a regular basis. Share with your children. You will see a transformation occur, because we also wish you safety, happiness, health, and peace.
And some of you, I've looked at some of the questions. There is a lot more information, and you'll find things in our website, but all of this is from a Carnegie study. It took us 5 years to conduct this study. So everything we've shared, it's evidence-based, and there's more to this. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, we have a couple of books. Velasquez Press will share later, but we also do PD. So you're welcome to either take a look at some of these books, also Corwin and Solution Tree. But there's another one coming up. And which one is that? This one. We're very excited about this one, Empowering Long-Term ELLs with Social Emotional Learning, Language and Literacy. And hopefully this will be out soon. But in the meantime, like we said, please go to those QRs and go to those websites. And I'm sure you'll find some very interesting and useful materials.
So this QR code will take you right to Margarita's website. And also there is, I think we posted the PowerPoint. If not, we'll get that up there posted, and also our contact information. So please feel free to enter any thoughts you might have on Twitter or access the website.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to see if there's any questions that you might have or anything that we could probably respond to. We're looking at the chat. Any books for younger children, there's lots. I recommend that you go to castle.org, where you get a lot of SEL information, and also Margarita's site, excel.com. There is several links to additional information.
Margarita, I was looking at some of the comments, and Hortensia was saying that usually upper grades tend to over scaffold because of the lack of maybe support or scaffolding at the lower elementary level. So what would be your recommendation for teachers at the secondary level, where that's where mostly our ELLs are identified? Is that where you would recommend that tier 2? Is it something that maybe they are placed all in a specific classroom with specific curriculum? What are your thoughts in that respect?
Well, the first thought is that every single teacher, the biology, chemistry, government, all the teachers go through the type of instruction that integrates language, academic language, vocabulary, discourse, reading comprehension. When we train high school teachers, we always ask them, raise your hand if you're a reading teacher. Nobody raises their hand. 3 days later, we ask again. All the secondary teachers raise their hand. They're all reading teachers. They're all writing teachers. But they have to have the opportunity to go through extensive professional development in order to develop all those SEL skills. I call them skills. They're competencies that they have missed out also. Content teachers want to know how to help, but sometimes we don't give them enough opportunities to learn, to practice, to get feedback, get some coaching on site. And then the same thing with ESL, ELD teachers. The tier 2 also need to revamp their strategies, especially when it comes to reading. And it's not just language on it by itself anymore. The centerpiece to all of this is reading. And if we can get everybody to integrate reading comprehension and a lot more writing, I think that's what's going to help the students, because it's the core content classrooms that need to not shelter so much, but have higher expectations and know the strategies for making something comprehensible and make it meaningful and to help them learn.
Thank you. Hector, one last question. Rita was talking about now we're using distant learning and kind of asking for that social distancing. Many school districts are not recommending teachers use Zoom because of some legal issues and things that have happened with their Zoom video. So the question is, how could they organize student interaction while we are experiencing not only distant learning, but physical distance?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're actually saying that we are separated physically, but we don't have to be separated socially. And we still have that opportunity through, of course, through technology to connect in one way or another. There are many, many different dimensions and many different practices that I'm beginning to hear more and more about. Zoom, still a lot of people do use Zoom. There are safeguards because you can protect your who enters by invitation only and so forth. But at the same time, there are other platforms, even Hangouts and go-to webinars, so forth, that you can actually do have collective sort of conversations, as well as even Facebook is coming out with those. So there are different platforms that are coming online. One important thing is that even when teachers, and I saw this happening at the very beginning, almost firsthand, that teachers are being pressured to provide lessons for the homes. And what's happening is that, you know, teachers are professionals, they've gone through training, they've developed lesson plans. What happened, it was an overload for parents. And parents, I hear a lot of parents just saying they're so grateful now that, you know, they understand what it takes to raise their child now that they're having that responsibility. But at the same time, teachers also need to communicate a sense of understanding and empathy, whether through phone calls. There are some schools that are organizing parent networks. So there could be through the PTA, there could be some parent leadership where they would have a phone tree and they begin to call each other to ask about their particular needs, the things that they may find critical right now, that they may need either supplies or instructional support. And it differs between the academic, socioeconomic levels as well. So we would like to say that, you know, using Zoom or Hangouts is very important. Protect who enters in, but always begin with a welcoming ritual. Don't just jump into the lesson, or like I saw some examples on YouTube where the students got together before the class, high school students, and they had a sort of like a gag where right as the teacher was welcoming everybody, they start playing music, and all the students, I think there were 20 of them on the Zoom call, they all start dancing. So I saw the teacher just jumping right into it, but the students and everybody needs that time to have a welcoming ritual. And then at the very end of the connection is to really make sure that they're doing well, if there's anything else they do need. So through many different avenues, it could be mail, it could be driving by homes. A lot of teachers and schools are dropping supplies and materials off directly in the home. So by any means necessary, show that compassion, that empathy, that sense of caring, and wanting every student to be successful.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Calderon and Dr. Montenegro. What an inspiring and timely and significant presentation. This has been a powerful addition to our CABE 2020 Virtual Community Webinar Series. The recording from today will be accessible to those who pre-registered for CABE 2020 and have access to the CABE 2020 Virtual Community website. Also, on the PowerPoint, you have that QR code where you'll be able to obtain not only the PowerPoint, but other information. I'm excited to share that tomorrow, April 29, we will be welcoming Dr. Jim Cummins and Dr. Ray Isola for a joint webinar at 2 p.m. And on Thursday, April 30th, we will be welcoming Dr. Alma Flor Ada and Dr. Isabel Campoy for a joint webinar at 2 p.m. You won't want to miss these two sessions. Again, thank you to Margarita and Hector and Velasquez Press, and thank you, all of you, our participants, for joining the CABE 2020 virtual community. On behalf of the CABE Board of Directors and the full CABE team, we hope you have felt the CABE connection, inspiration, and love that we have for all of you that although we're not there physically, it's as if we were there together at the CABE 2020 conference. Please stay safe, be well, and know that we are all in this together. We are CABE strong, so thank you and hasta la próxima. Goodbye.
Gracias.
Bye,
Gracias.
everybody.